This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Tuesday. It's October 10th, 2023. The big story today is, again, and it's going to be for a while, this Israeli war with Hamas. And what's happening is that, as everyone knows, that we had a massive attack from Hamas across the border, breaking down barriers, the Gaza Strip, and coming across in a very low-tech fashion, except for maybe these flying helicopters, individual helicopters that brought these paragliders in from the air to attack a music festival. Otherwise, they were pretty low-tech, just coming, bulldozers taking down part of the wall, and troops coming across, or terrorists coming across and killing people. There's one of the big surprises, and one of the issues being asked is, why didn't intelligence in the United States or around the world have any idea this was going to happen? There's been some thought that Egypt had said to Israel, expect something big, but that's not exactly actionable intelligence. We always expect something big when you're in security and try to prepare for it. But the problem is that this caught everybody by surprise. And it was a vicious attack in which hundreds of people were killed, women and children in particular, slaughtered. Others have been taken hostage, and Hamas is now threatening to televise executions one by one, which they may do. It's going to be a vicious campaign. And what Israel has done, this is 50 years after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, which started on October 6th. Hamas attack was on October 7th, 2023, exactly 50 years later. I mean, that's kind of the kind of historical accident or coincidence that is almost hard to overlook. It's almost like the hand of God in terms of every 50 years we have a major event going on threatening Israel. The Yom Kippur War was a vicious war, which Israel won. In this one, Israel's massed enormous troops. They mobilized thousands of troops. They're in the process of mobilizing, and they're positioned to have a massive pouring in of troops into the Gaza Strip is it's a narrow strip of land that lies within Israel, and it's really right onto the Mediterranean. And it has been dominated and run by Hamas. Now, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's a Sunni terrorist organization, which means that it's like the Saudi Arabians. They're Sunni Muslims who believe that the caliphate, the basically civil control of Islam, it should be in charge, civil authorities. When you had a caliphate, then Turkey, for instance, had the Ottoman Empire was a caliphate that was a Muslim-controlled area by Sunni Muslims. The Iranians are Shiites. The Shiites believe in a different, totally sect than the Sunnis, and they are at odds with one another. The Shiites believe in that only the family of the Prophet Muhammad should be in charge of ruling Islam, and they believe that this young boy, the family of the Prophet Muhammad, went down a well, and he's going to come out of the well, out of hiding, and there'll be an apocalypse, which will essentially be a worldwide war, and Sunni Islam will be defeated, and Shiites will triumph worldwide when the Mahdi comes out of the well. Now, I actually heard Ahmadinejad, who is the president of Iran, when he gave a speech at the United Nations, and he talked about the Mahdi. I'm not making this up. This is really the difference between the Shiites and the Sunnis. So Iran has the great Satan is the United States, little Satan is Israel. And if Iran could eliminate both the United States and Israel, it would next turn on Saudi Arabia, because the conflict in Islam is that deep. And it's not the Iranian people. The Iranian people have been very modern under the Shah, very cosmopolitan. Iranians are millions of Iranians living in the United States today. They're very good entrepreneurs. They thrive. They fit into in California, there's a great number of Iranians. And the Iranian people want the mullahs gone. Every few years, they're in the streets protesting this religious rule. But they can't get rid of the mullahs. The mullahs control the power. They control the police. They control the military. They have these bajij, which are on motorcycles, kind of like a paramilitary group. And they're brutal in executions. The mullahs will execute people for violating even minor violations of their moral code. And by the way, they're not very fond of homosexuals. And so therefore, the left, which has embraced Hamas, which has embraced the anti-Israel group, doesn't realize or ignores the fact that Islam is much stricter about sexual mores than is Christianity actually today. So, where you see the women, the Muslim women, all wearing, basically you can only see their eyes; their heads are completely covered. This is the traditional. If you go to the Middle East, and I've been to the Middle East many times, it's a strange place, and Hamas is entrenched in Gaza. So what Israel has been doing for the last 2 days has been air attacks and missile attacks. They've been trying to kill the leadership of Hamas, to break up its infrastructure. They've been sending missiles or air attacks on buildings in which the Hamas have lived. I'm sure Israeli intelligence knows exactly who the Hamas structure leaders are and will eliminate them. Next, when this invasion starts, what Netanyahu is conservative, very much to the right. Israeli politics have gone to the left, just like U.S. politics. And the left wants to accommodate with the Muslims. They want to accommodate with the terrorists. They think we can make deals with them. Well, Netanyahu has said from the beginning that he's there to defend Israel. And now with this attack, which shocks Israel, shocks the world, it's like a 9/11 wake-up call for Israel. What they'll do is they'll cut off all the water, all the electricity, all the natural gas in Gaza. So it'll be unlivable, basically. Nothing will work. And Israel will come in with its tanks, and you basically level the Gaza. They're going to just destroy it. And they've told Israel, announced to the people, the Palestinians in Gaza, to get out. Your civilians, get out, because they're not going to be able to spare civilians with the kind of attack they're planning to do. Now, this is going to start any time. I mean, it could be today. Once Netanyahu decides the military is ready to go, when they've done their planning, they know how they're going to do the invasion into Gaza, they will launch, and it will be massive. They're not going to fool around this time. This is too serious. This is not 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we did not have the military technology. We didn't have the military capabilities. And today, the technology is extreme, and the capabilities are frightening. So within 48 hours, I would say that Israel could be predicted to take over complete command and control of the Gaza Strip. Now, where this leads is the big question, because Hezbollah, which is in Lebanon, Hezbollah is again another organization that is combination Sunni and Shiite. I mean, some of the leaders of Hezbollah were very close to the Ayatollah Khomeini, who in 1979 came back to Iran and led the revolution that put the mullahs in power with the Shah of Iran when Jimmy Carter was president. And that was a disaster. We had days, counting out the days when we had American embassy personnel who were hostages in Iran, trying to get them out. They didn't get out until Ronald Reagan was inaugurated. First, on his inauguration day, Iran released the hostages. They knew that there was a new sheriff in town. They didn't want to mess with Reagan. Carter was completely inept. And Carter actually praised Ayatollah Khomeini until he took the hostages and refused to give the Shah of Iran any exile. He wouldn't let him in the United States. Shah wandered around for a while. And this is, again, going to be a disaster because this war is going to expand. If it comes into Lebanon with Hezbollah attacking the north of Israel, Israel will then have to think about launching a massive attack on Lebanon. That's harder, more difficult. Israel has invaded and occupied much of Lebanon, and it's very difficult. In the Middle East, one of the problems is simply demographics. The Muslim populations are expanding, and the Israeli population is aging and is not getting the support it did 50 years ago. The American Jewish community does not support Israel the way it did 50 years ago. And the Biden administration, I think, like the Obama administration, leans towards the Muslim states. If you'll remember, Obama in his first months as president went to Cairo and talked to a group which included Hamas, Hezbollah, and others who were radicals, and said that he'd experienced Islam on 3 continents: Indonesia, Africa, and the United States. And so he really aligned. Obama was raised as a Muslim in Indonesia by his Muslim stepfather, Lolo Soetoro. He was Barry Soetoro for a long time before he decided to become Barack Obama. So this is the complications here of a very, very difficult situation. And Iran is behind it all as the master terrorist planner. And again, this is an Iranian surrogate war against Israel through the terrorist organizations which Iran has funded. And we just gave Iran $9 billion again. And whether it was their money or not their money, we seem to have some lies coming out of the State Department about that. The Biden administration is now completely, I would say, embarrassed on all sides. The corruption scandal and the beginning of impeachment hearings, the fact that the Ukrainian war is not going well for Ukraine, but yet we have war now on Europe, the biggest armed conflict since World War II going on in Europe. And now we've got the Middle East breaking out in violence, and China is over here taking a look at Taiwan. The world is headed towards World War III very fast. And any war in the Middle East has a tendency to escalate. Iran's going to be watching to say, is there an opportunity for Iran to enter aggressively with the Revolutionary Guard taking a more active role? And I'm sure that's being contemplated. Israel is contemplating not only getting the Gaza, which is object number one. I think that'll be accomplished in a matter of a couple of days because they're going to do it brutally. And they're going to make sure that it's unlivable until they get control of it. And they probably are not going to return that to Hamas. Israel's probably not going to do that. Netanyahu is sounding very, very firm right now. Of course, Israel will need assistance. The Biden administration doesn't resupply Israel. Israel is going to run out of ordnance in a relatively quick period of time. So Israel's only got a limited period of time where it can be this active in the field without assistance from the United States. And how much assistance the Biden administration will give is uncertain at this point. Biden also abandoned all that military equipment in Afghanistan, just left it there, which I'm sure has been being reused throughout the Middle East by the aggressive terrorists and by those who are radically opposed to the United States. Conflict in Syria could heat up again. I'm sure Iran will do everything it can to cause massive disruption and probably more terrorist events in the Middle East as this unfolds. And Israel has got to be thinking about an airstrike on Iran to take out its nuclear capabilities. And the issue is, which will be discussed in Tel Aviv, and I'm going to tell, and in Jerusalem, is why wait? I want to point out to you, I wrote 3 books on this. Okay, so in 2006, I wrote Atomic Iran. The book, at that time, people weren't really ready to hear about Iran. The book was everywhere. It was published. It was right after Unfit for Command. It was my next book. And it just did not sell very well because people didn't want to hear about Iran. It was a distant topic. And of course, that's 2006. And today, it's like 17 years later. What I wrote about then is happening now. And also, I was in Israel. I'm going to show you another book. It's a very short book, but it's an important one. In 2009, 3 years later, I wrote Why Israel Can't Wait. Now, this was right after Obama was elected president, and Obama was actually in Cairo when I was in Israel. In this short book, and it's Why Israel Can't Wait. Well, that's where we are right now. Israel can't wait any longer. Time isn't going to help. And I'm going to tell you a story here in a minute of what my experience over there. But first, Israel's going to be calculating, do we strike Iran now, or do we wait and see if we can't continue down the road without having a war with Iran? Well, the point is, Iran is not going to get weaker now. The sanctions are being removed. Iran is back in the oil market. Iran is making money. We just sent it another $9 billion or released $9 billion, wherever that money came from, whether it was theirs or whether it was new money or we just printed it. It doesn't matter. It's $9 billion. And they will use that. Iran will use that money to cause terror and to foment war. Now, in the beginning of this book on Why Israel Can't Wait, I quoted Ezekiel 39:28 about what sounds like a nuclear war between Magog and Israel, but it's been debated whether that's Russia or Iran, and now Russia and Iran are in an alliance, which the Biden administration managed to push the two of them together. And Ezekiel 39:28 says, "Then they shall know I am the Lord their God, which caused them to be led into captivity among the heathen, that I have gathered them unto their own land, and have left none of them any more there." Well, what Ezekiel says is that God intervenes in this war and Israel wins, and that once Israel was reestablished, which happened in 1948, Israel will never be gone. It's here to stay. Now, the conversation I want to relate to you is I talk about in this book. In fact, I think I open up pretty much with it. Is I had a meeting with Yalon, who was at that time the vice prime minister and minister of strategic affairs, Moshe Yalon. And we had an interview in his office on June 14th, 2009. And what we discussed in that meeting was whether or not Israel was prepared to deal with Iran, especially with Iran getting nuclear weapons. I was not sure at all that I was going to get the meeting. I was called at the hotel, told to get ready. Until I actually was in Yalon's office, I wasn't sure we were going to meet. It was done very privately and very quietly. He was the second highest official in the Israeli government. He's outranked only by Netanyahu. I also met Shimon Peres, who was Israel's, at that time, head of state, on that trip. And what I discussed with Yalon, I said, what are you going to do? I mean, Iran's going to have nuclear weapons eventually. And he said, Dr. Corsi, you have no idea what we're capable of doing. He said, you have no idea. I said, okay, give me an idea. He said, how difficult do you think it would be for us to put out all the lights in the Middle East except our own? Well, I'm not sure what capability he had, whether he was thinking about an EMP attack, detonating a nuclear weapon in high altitude to take out electricity, or some other capability. But right now, it's very interesting to me that the water, the heat, the light, everything is going to be turned off in the Gaza. And Israel's going to go in there without the ability of the Iranians to communicate. They'll probably take down the internet. There'll be no communication. And Israel is not going to wait. I think at this point, I'm sure, I'm 100% certain that Israel has been contemplating, in the middle of this, launching an airstrike against Iran. Why wait? What's going to get better? The United States is only completely disintegrating. We're intentionally destroying ourselves. We've got leadership that hates America. And, Barack Obama said we're going to have fundamental change when he was elected. Well, we certainly have had fundamental change. And the country right now is being dominated by neo-Marxism, which is worried about climate change. Are people really going to worry about climate change when we're on the doorstep of nuclear war? I think this is the issues that people have to take seriously. This is not a minor event going on in the Middle East. These are end-time biblical events. This is the possibly the historic or maybe the ultimate confrontation between Islam and the Jewish faith. Jews are being killed again. And you have Palestinians around the world outside the Opera House in Sydney saying, "Gas the Jews," talking about the concentration camps and the gas chambers. This Jew hatred is insanity. And it is destructive. It's satanic. And if we're going to celebrate Hitler and the Palestinian movement, I don't think we need a lot of discussion about morality or the support for the Palestinians because they're oppressed. Palestinians have been given huge amounts of money by the world, including the United Nations. Going to the United Nations, the Palestinians are celebrated all over the place, with displays and arguments, etc. The Palestinians intentionally keep their people poor in order to have a showcase for getting more money to help Palestinians. You go into the Palestinian areas, which I've done in Israel, and the streets are not paved. Children are running around without much clothes on. There's animals in the streets, all kinds of things going on. You cross over into Israel, and it's like being in the United States. It's all modern, policed, etc. And the Israeli population are armed. Again, that's another issue because the left in Israel doesn't like weapons anymore. They like them here. And an unarmed population, if the people in Israel had been armed the way they used to be armed, if they had this kind of an attack by the Palestinians with terrorist guerrilla forces, someone there would have been able to fight back. When you get an unarmed population being attacked like this, you have no defense. And then I'd like to further point out that our border is wide open. You don't think we could have attacks like this across the border? We've had attacks. Pancho Villa attacked Colombia and New Mexico. It started a war with, this is back in the early 1900s. We've had incursions into the United States from Mexico at different times. And Mexico still covets much of the territory that is Southern California, Texas, etc., was once Mexico. So again, once we have open borders and the infiltration of Chinese and Palestinians and who knows who else is coming across this border, because we're not doing anything to police it or to secure it, and we're having wide open terrorists come here, criminals come here, and criminals in the United States aren't being punished. They're being let go, and the judges are saying, "Oh, well, the criminals were the victims. Society has treated them so badly that they're the victims." This is completely upside down, and a world that's upside down will be in chaos, and a world in chaos is going to be ultimately on the brink of saying, do we want to continue civilization, or are we going to start seeing Washington, D.C. nuked? As I pointed out before, when I wrote Unfit for Command in 2004, we were at the Marriott Key Bridge. I walked across the Key Bridge. It's this bridge that goes across the Potomac by Georgetown, right? It goes right into the Georgetown campus. I looked back and saw Washington, and I had a vision at that moment of Washington being destroyed by a nuclear weapon, a massive nuclear attack. It was devastated. I could see the devastation. That could happen. That might have been a future vision. I'm certainly thinking about that today. Chris, do you have some comments? Let's get a little dialogue on this.
I know this has been a centuries-old conflict between the two sides. There are some things to be said, and I'm not siding with Palestine or the Palestinians or Hamas for any reason here whatsoever. But there's something to be said for the what's going on in the Gaza Strip. They're kind of locked up. These people are kind of locked up in there and everything else. But having said all that, what Hamas did, there's no excuse for this. They were kidnapping, they were raping, and they were beating uh, women and children. Okay, this is they're, as you said before, they're going to televise, or they're planning on televising executions, and this is how they think they need to fight. Then what's more reprehensible is you're seeing people in Times Square, and you're seeing even some people in Congress uh, patting these people on the back over doing such things. These are also the same people that want to grab your guns, our weapons, our right to self-defense, so we can be just as vulnerable as the people of Israel.
Now, this is the problem. The left does not understand that there is evil in the world.
Or do they?
Well, that's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question. It's really at the heart of it. Is neo-Marxism a satanic movement? Is it embracing? They've taken down the 10 Commandments all across the country, but they're putting up these statues of Satan, and no one seems to be able to stop them or to object to it. They're having satanic rituals in the United States. I've known people in Silicon Valley who have escaped the Satanism, and I mean open Satanism, worship of the devil. Okay, now when that happens, when the gates of hell are opened, and Satan's allowed to roam freely, we're in a period of time which is very destructive, and we've lived through it before. World War II was no fun. Europe was destroyed. The only reason the United States wasn't destroyed was because the technology didn't allow the Nazis to reach here. They were thinking about it. They would have. If Hitler had gotten an atomic bomb, he'd have used it. He wanted one. Now, if he hadn't decided he was going to kill the Jews would have fought for Germany, and the Jewish scientists who fled, came to the United States and helped us develop the Manhattan Project, would have been willing to do that for Hitler had he not decided he was going to kill the Jews. It's this insanity that grips human beings, and basically we're a species that has to kill to live. We're going to eat things that are alive and growing, the plants, or we're going to kill animals, and that instinct in the human being is one that demands control. And religion, belief in God, the whole Christianity is a way to embrace the kind of morals that allows civilization to occur. I think in Rome, one of the reasons Rome got rid of the pagan gods under Constantine was that the Roman mothers got tired of seeing their children made into sexual perverts by what was going on in Rome as Rome headed towards its fall. So the idea of religion, which has been demonized by the left, you believe in sky fairies, and these are imaginary ideas. There is no God to intervene in it. We don't see God anywhere. Well, I see God everywhere. Everything that exists is alive. It's got internal activity going on. It's intentional. There's rules. It operates a certain way. This is not accidental. And when people reject God and think that we're God, we have wars, and now we've got the capability to have thermonuclear war. I want to cover a couple more things, but any final comments before we move on?
I have a question for you, if you don't mind me asking this question.
Sure.
I was watching the hard line that Benjamin Netanyahu was taking. Now, I'm not a big fan of the idea of just going in and bombing these buildings and destroying them, because, again, you're bombing non-combatants, women and children, and you're turning around. And again, I understand why it's happening, because if Hamas engages in total war, how are you going to retaliate? So this is not a simple answer and a simple question here. But I do like the idea of him shutting the place down and trying to filter certain people out of there. He's shutting down electricity, shutting down food going in there. He's really taking a hard stance to protect his people. I do think we should consider taking harder stances on our border security and things like that here. But aside from what we're doing, What are your thoughts on what Netanyahu is doing that's aside from the bombing? I mean, some of the other precautions he's taking this time.
Well, I mean, again, there's always sympathy for people who are being attacked.
Right.
And I can see that you have some of that in your heart and you're expressing it.
But
Here's the issue.
Right.
Having been in Israel countless times, many times, and having talked to the leadership of Israel on a very serious basis for hours, being invited to come over and talk to their Ministry of Defense about Iran and other things I've done with Israel, first of all, you've got a mentality which is fading because of the aging of the population and those who experienced World War II dying, but the experience of extermination, being rounded up out of their homes and put into death camps and treated the way that was a unforgivable and unforgettable incident. In fact, when I went to Yad Vashem and I've been twice at Auschwitz and walked Auschwitz. And what always amazed me was that anyone could have preserved their faith in God, having gone through that experience. And many did. There are rooms in these Holocaust museums that are dedicated to those who went to the gas chambers believing in God and accepting the fate. But this is a scar, and the Jewish people going back through Babylonian captivity, being in Egypt, they've gone through experiences where extermination is a possibility, genocide. Okay, now Netanyahu has gone through, they tried to imprison Netanyahu like they're trying to imprison Trump.
Yes. And of course, Bolsonaro in Brazil.
And the left wants to persecute anyone who wants to stand for God or stand to protect the traditional values. Now, Netanyahu has reached the point where he's been through all of this harassment from the left. And so this is also a war on the Israeli left and the U.S. left, which are only destructive. Their policies are openly destroying. And that's what is at stake here. Now, Netanyahu is going to have, and I continue to say, God, the biblical God is a just God, which means he has the ability to have the judgment of God, which is harsh. The Jewish people, for losing their faith, were cast out of Jerusalem, and the Romans. I've looked at the Temple Mount, the way the Romans finally destroyed the Second Temple, and there were these huge, massive blocks of stone that were the foundation of the Temple Mount, and also probably built in the temple, that they just pushed over a cliff. They're still laying there in complete chaos. Now, this was the Romans were not. They were viciously angry at these people. They hated these people. They destroyed their temple. They threw these rocks down in complete chaos. And that's, again, the type of anger and genocide and hatred of the Jews that's possible.
Right. That's why I understand what Netanyahu was doing, and I do appreciate the idea that you're taking other forms, or you're trying to do other things besides straight napalming and bombing all the time. You're trying to take other precautions, other sanctions. That's a good thing too. So kind of beating them on 2 or 3 different fronts. That's a good thing. What really perplexes me is the left's argument in America is, well, people are going to be, as far as allowing the people to bear arms, well, there are people who aren't trained and they can't do these things, or they don't, or they can just grab guns and they can do whatever they want in their property. We don't like that. Well, in Israel, if I'm correct, aren't young people, when they come of age, required to serve for a couple of years in the Israeli army, which makes them properly trained, or renders them or creates properly trained individuals when it comes to handling firearms.
I want to cover a couple more subjects, but I want to deal with this.
Well, you were there. That's why I'm asking. Yes.
Look, the Israeli population is trained in firearms, and there's a great awareness of firearms, whether they were in the military or not. Yes, there's a lot of military training, and you'll see the military in uniform carrying automatic weapons in the cities, and it's normal, because any moment there could be a terrorist, and that terrorist is going to be put out of action very quickly. I mean, there's every place in Israel, traditionally, there's armed force around to stop anything from getting out of control, and it will react quickly. I've seen it with my own eyes react quickly. And, terrorists come in with, suicide terrorists come in and blow up buses, sit in the bus and then blow themselves up. They go into weddings and blow themselves up. It's potentially a very dangerous place. And what Netanyahu is doing now is he's had enough. They've tried to tolerate Hamas. Hamas was allowed to run the Gaza, and they've had enough. And this is over. So if he has to level Gaza, he will do it. And this is a sense of the anger that God feels against evil. If you don't think the judgment of God is severe, you're wrong. You don't think hell exists, you're wrong. There are consequences of action living here.
It's all fair and makes a lot of sense in this context.
Well, and you've got to understand it in this context.
Right.
Because we continue to forget that there is right and wrong. There is evil. There are objective values. There are the rules according to which civilization is possible are fragile. And that's what our founding fathers realized, and they realized how difficult it was going to be to protect liberty for long. The forces of evil are very strong and very seductive. We're seeing this right now in all kinds of movements. The climate change movement, which is scientific nonsense, but it's very powerful as a cult religion. It's a secular religion. One of the points I'm going to cover today, if we move on from the subject, is, right, and let's move on, because I do want to tie some of these things together. Second thing I want to cover on all this is the oil market. The oil market's going to be in disarray now. You're going to find that this is going to disrupt the flow of oil from the Middle East. In 1973, we had the Yom Kippur War. That was the prelude for the Arab oil embargo, and possible retaliation. They wanted to get back at Carter. They lost that war. And so the OPEC countries, Islamic countries, decided they were going to place an oil embargo on the United States. We had long gasoline lines because gasoline was almost virtually rationed. And Jimmy Carter put on a cardigan and told the world we were running out of oil and that we better turn down our thermostats. Well, Jimmy Carter was a fool, and he should never have been president. I think only Biden, who's probably demented or in some form of senior dementia, tops Biden as our worst president ever. And there have been some bad ones. But this is a lack of leadership that, in other words, when this whole order of the world, when civilization begins to crumble, and it can crumble very fast, you're going to see the oil markets rearranged. Now, Iran has taken some positions in the oil market in which Iran has been supplying this kind of crescent of countries, which is dependent on Iran. And Iran has been building grid systems to supply electricity to countries like Yemen and Lebanon, this whole series of countries that are stretched together in the Middle East, going from east to west. And Iran is going to probably cause disruptions in the oil market. Certainly, disruptions have already occurred. The sanctions the EU took against Russia for invading Ukraine, Russia just cut off natural gas. Right now, Europe's going back into the second winter without Russian natural gas, and already coal plants are being started up again. There's discussion of starting up nuclear. People are going to freeze to death because they have to cut down trees to stay warm in Germany. Climate change is not going to matter when people are seeing, the possibility of these kinds of terrorist attacks arising in Europe, which is certainly vulnerable with its Muslim populations who are going to react angrily to what's going on in the Middle East right now. They're not going to sit quietly in France, in these enclaves that have not assimilated of Muslims that have immigrated from the Middle East into France or countries like Sweden and Denmark. They're not going to sit quietly. The world is going to go into turmoil. Now, if oil does get, I'm envisioning oil $200 a barrel. I think it's going to go there. I don't think this conflict is going to end quickly. I think it's going to expand. I think it's going to multiply in terms of the number of countries who get involved. Because when one side says, well, they've killed Jews, well, okay, now the people supporting Israel are angry and want revenge. Well, they've killed Palestinians. Look what they did in all the United Nations, I guarantee you, will be showing scenes of Israeli destruction of the Gaza. And that will inflame Islam across the world. So we are in a position of escalation. And I'm saying this is the kind of oil crisis again, with the world on the brink. I mean, the International Monetary Fund is saying the world recovery is going very slowly, and this crisis is going to throw us into a massive global recession. I've been seeing it coming. That's why I wrote this book about, the coming global crash. It's been on my mind and my soul for months, maybe years, that this day is coming. The world economy is probably going to collapse. And it was intentionally done. These things were set in motion intentionally. John Kerry, who I opposed in Unfit for Command, and when I wrote this book on atomic Iran, I said, John Kerry said, let's give Iran nuclear weapons to see what they're going to do with them. What are they going to do with them? They're going to make a bomb out of them. What do you think they're going to do? John Kerry's a fool. He should never have been taken seriously. And here he is now, climate czar, going around in his private jets or U.S. government jets, preaching to everybody about climate change. We've got to quit using hydrocarbon fuels. China is going to use all the hydrocarbon fuels they can get. China has Fischer-Tropsch plants, which are making petroleum products out of coal. China understands that this is not fossil fuel. They understand the chemistry of hydrocarbon fuels, and they are actively exploiting them. And they're going to use them. So these stories are all connected today. Robert Kennedy has announced he's going to run as an independent. Now, that's going to be disruptive. It's going to cost him millions of dollars to get registered in all the states, but he will do it. And as such, he's going to be a force to contend with, because he's going to draw votes, especially from the Democrats. The Democrats have had also a Green candidate declare that he's going to run for president. The Democrats are fractionalizing. They're going to be split up. John Kerry, who had played a major role in Obama's deal with sending airplanes full of cash to Iran and telling Iran eventually they could have a nuclear weapon. Now he's warning around the world, telling people to stop using hydrocarbon fuels. This guy, John Kerry, has been one of the most dangerous forces in American politics now, going on for 60 years. He was in his 70s. And John Kerry is a blight on American politics. I've opposed him in 2004. I'm still opposed to him. And the Swift Boat movement played a role in him not being elected president, but he still hung around in the Senate, influential in the Obama administration with Iran, influential in the Biden administration with climate change. Two of the biggest mistakes in U.S. history ever. Climate change movement is a mass hysteria, and it's destructive. Now, there's a video being shown. There's one of the electric buses, the battery blew up in Great Britain, and there was huge fire through this black, horrible smoke into the air, and they couldn't put it out because these battery lithium fires can't be put out with water. They are not quenched. They have to be put out with chemicals, and it's not easy to do. No fire department in the United States is really equipped to handle exploding electric batteries. And one of the other stories I've put up is that when you see the amount of money it costs to repair electric vehicles, there's a story circulating of this one particular truck and a minor dent, and it cost $41,000 to fix the dent, which is about the value of the vehicle. So these electric vehicles, when their battery goes, some of those batteries aren't being made anymore. I mean, Chris pointed out before we were preparing for the program, you got a 2012 Chevrolet. You can still go and get parts to fix the battery. You get a new battery. You can fix the engine. The parts are still available. You get an electric vehicle, you may not be able to even get at what you need to fix it, given the complexity with which they're built. And if the battery goes, you may not be able to replace that battery or fix it. It's junk. It's dangerous, and it could cost you a lot just to put a new battery in. These are not practical vehicles. These are the bizarre results of mass hysteria, worrying about carbon dioxide, which never was a noxious chemical. We exhale carbon dioxide. Plants grow with carbon dioxide. We're in an interglacial warming period. We should be happy it's warm. An ice age is not particularly pleasant to live through. And another one will come when the Earth gets at its most elliptical point in its orbit around the sun, which happens about every 100,000 years, called the Milankovitch cycles. So today, the theme that I'm trying to convey is that we're in a world crisis that is going to deteriorate before it gets any better. And as it's unfolding, it's going to have major implications. The middle class of the United States is at risk. People are living one paycheck away from bankruptcy. They've got credit card debt, which is now at $1 trillion. Housing prices will have to fall because interest rates are now about 7.5% on a 30-year fixed mortgage. They're not giving as many variable rate mortgages because when interest rates go up, that's when people lose their houses. They could afford the mortgage at 0 or 2% interest, but they can't afford the mortgage at 8% interest. And again, we're in intentional destruction because we're just printing money. Modern monetary theory, another bad idea, that because it's fiat currency, we can just pay off the debt with more printed money. Okay, so here's a token, it's worth $33 trillion. I just paid off the debt. Well, you didn't. You made that up. It's a fairy tale. You didn't have any real value there. You just hypothecated it out of thin air. Once the world realizes that, then there's no basis for the money being traded. And these forms of insanity are going to play out destructively. This book will be out in a few days. And the whole theme, I'm writing a lot these days because I'm concerned what's going on. I decided I'm not retired anymore. So this one, I'm 77 years old. I'm probably more active today than I've ever been. The truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. Exposing woke insanity in an age of disinformation. We're living in an age of disinformation, an age of lies. In a situation that's desperate, I remain hopeful. Why? Because God is still in the game. And we've been given a solution to this problem. When things get foobar, when it's impossible to figure out how we can solve things, 2 Chronicles 7:14 says, get on your knees and ask God to forgive us for having allowed the world to get to this situation. We're taking God out of our schools in the 1940s, and then out of our public squares, and now out of our hearts, for allowing babies to be massacred in the womb, cut to pieces, ripped apart. That fetus feels it. That's a psychic wound as well as a physical wound. And if you think a mother suffers nothing from an abortion, you have not talked to a woman who's gone through an abortion. These are not minor incidents, and God needs to forgive us for violating God's law, which does exist. If we get on our knees and truly ask for redemption, God says he will hear our prayer and heal our land. God will have to heal this, and we may have to go through the judgment of God before we experience that healing. But God will win. God always wins. God created this place. God can unplug it anytime he wants. It can go away and leave no trace of it, if God so chooses. So please join me in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14. And I am hopeful that the world will go through an experience which may teach us once and for all that lying doesn't work, that hypocrisy and Satan is only destruction, that neo-Marxism, a cultural revolution, only destroy. You can't imagine, like John Lennon, imagine a world with no borders. There are millions of us dreamers. Why don't you join us? We can make the world over. No, you can't. You can follow God's law, and this world will work. Will it be fun, pleasant? No, you're still going to die. You don't get out of this experience alive. You weren't meant to get out of this experience alive. The value of this experience is the experience itself and what you do with it. That's the only merit of living here. It's not permanent. And once you realize that, we can begin to understand religion, why God created this place, why it's important for us to acknowledge God. And as such, I remain hopeful that at the end of this, which we're going to go through, this age of disinformation, this period of darkness, we will emerge back into the light. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi today. Today is October 10th, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. Please share this program, spread the word of this program. We'll be back tomorrow. We're broadcasting on thetruthcentral.com every weekday. God bless.